Welcome to Distilled, the Bourbon Podcast, where we drink bourbon and then we talk about it. I'm Brent. I'm here with my co-hosts, Chuck and Brian. Fellas, how's it going today?
It's great. Another day, another pour bourbon. So
Another day, another bourbon. And you know, how many historic, retired labels are there out there that have been revived? We've talked several times about Peerless. We've talked about other brands. Today, we found another one. Is that right, Chuck?
Yep. Ran across it at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, did a little bit of research, tried their product, loved it, and made arrangements that we could speak with their master blender, Ashley Barnes.
So here's our interview with Ashley.
So we are here with Ashley Barnes, the master blender for E.J Curley and Company. This is a brand I was not very familiar with, but I was at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival in Bardstown in September of 2023, and I saw E.J Curley. Kind of rang a bell. I knew nothing about it, but and their booth is up there with the big boys, with Makers and Jim Beam and so forth like that. They're not down in the craft area, which I love craft. You all know that. So on the last day of the festival, we are having lunch in downtown Bardstown, and I pulled out my phone and I looked up E.J Curley, and I discovered that the historic E.J Curley was the most famous bourbon man you never heard of.
Is that right?
He was a big deal in his day. His name didn't get passed down like E.H. Taylor or even James E. Pepper, but E.J Curley was a big dog. So, Ashley, when did E.J Curley get started in the bourbon business?
So he came to the U.S. And was stationed during the Civil War at Camp Nelson. And he used his connections for procurement at Camp Nelson to start making whiskey. That was around 1867.
Okay.
When all that got started.
So what was it about that site that made it a good site for making bourbon and whiskey?
I feel like it's pretty inspiring. I know you guys said a few of you have been there. Of course, we've got our limestone water. You're right there on the Kentucky River. And the access to amazing water, the grains, the ability to get the equipment needed to produce on large scale. It just was a perfect recipe for him to start producing high quality whiskey.
Great temperature fluctuations as well to push that fluid in and out of those barrels, I'm sure.
And as I read,
several rick houses are still there. Wild Turkey owns them and still uses them today. So
the Kentucky River was useful for bringing grain, especially corn, into the distillery because the distillery was right on the banks of the Kentucky River in Jessamine County, right?
Yep.
And I expect that they might have shipped some barrels out by barge. I don't know that for a fact, but certainly would have been convenient for them.
I mean, it would make sense. And if you've ever been down there, that road's pretty windy. I'm sure that's what they used. And to haul a wagon with horses or, pulling in and out would be quite difficult to get up and down there. So I'd say they use that river for a lot of means to hauling grain and in and out with bourbon. And
yeah, the Kentucky River at that site is at the bottom of a V-shaped valley. So you have these steep walls, and some of those steep walls have been called the Palisades. We'll talk about that a little while later. Well, evidently, E.J Curley was pretty successful because by the 1880s, he built a second distillery on the other side of this big hill called Boone's Knoll. And so now he's operating two distilleries, the Bluegrass Distillery and the Boone's Knoll Distillery. So he's doing okay.
He did pretty good for himself. I mean, he's known for many, many successful brands: Bluegrass Bourbon, Bluegrass Rye, Boone's Knoll Bourbon, Curly Rye. He was a genius at marketing too. He was the first person to ever coin the term bluegrass and use it in commerce, which obviously we use bluegrass a lot today. So he was very creative, very ahead of his time, forward thinking. And what we hope to do with this brand and the relaunch is to celebrate that and honor that by looking forward, being creative and innovative.
So 1901 was a big year for E.J Curley. Can you tell us about a big sale he made that year?
just a tiny little sale of around 8,600 barrels to a gentleman in Chicago for the equivalent of today would be about $19 million.
Wow.
So, he was doing things on the same scale as E.H. Taylor. They were both producing large volumes of bourbon and quality bourbon at the same time. Obviously, H. Taylor went on and continued to produce and grow, where E.J. Curley was like, so 1901, he sold his interest actually in 1901 of the E.J. Curley and Co. to Kentucky Distilleries Warehouse Company.
Which was the Whiskey Trust.
So which was the Whiskey Trust, in New York. And he formed the Distiller Security. That's actually the Whiskey Trust. So the Kentucky Distilleries Warehouse Company is what he sold E.J. Curley to. And then he created the Distiller Security in New York City, that's also known as the Whiskey Trust. And that controlled the majority of Kentucky bourbon at the time.
So,
and then,
so he's still in the business. He's not producing. He doesn't own the distillery anymore, but he's a multimillionaire, or the equivalent of a multimillionaire. And he kept on making money. He was far more successful financially than E.H. Taylor, who had to sell his distilleries now and then because he'd go broke or be overextended.
Yeah. I mean, he was, like I said, he was very innovative. He was just so ahead of his time, which I think is what, for me, was one of many things that drew me to the brand and being involved with E.J. Curley and, the opportunity to revive a heritage brand as a native Kentuckian. Lived here my whole life.
So,
did a brief stint not here, but momentary insanity. It's an amazing opportunity, and the history and what he did for the industry, is phenomenal.
So E.J. Curley, 1901, he sells these 8,600 barrels for the equivalent of today of $19 million. He dies in 1921 in Monte Carlo. He lived in Paris, right? Kind of lived a life. Paris, France, not Paris, Kentucky.
I mean, Paris, France. Yeah, you can't knock him. He lived, spend his days at the Ritz Hotel in Paris, France, and then he ended up passing in Monte Carlo at the age of 86 in 1921.
And he left behind an estate in 1921 of $10 million. So he sold that whiskey for $700,000 or something like that in 1901 dollars. But 20 years later, he is worth the equivalent. Well, he's worth $10 million in 1921 dollars that he leaves to two great nephews in Massachusetts. $10 million in 1921, the equivalent of $180 million today. So he was way more financially successful than E.H. Taylor.
Yeah, he's like Jeff Bezos. He's in that level.
And I can't believe I hadn't heard of this guy.
Yeah,
I also can't believe I haven't had bourbon yet. So, while I love this history, can we talk a little bit about what we're drinking so I can start enjoying it, and then we will continue on with this story because it's fascinating.
So what got me excited was I read this history, and I love my bourbon distilleries and I love my bourbon history. So now I'm invested in the story. So it's starting to rain that Sunday afternoon. We seek out the booth, partly because it was shelter from the rain, but I'm curious about this whiskey. So they had two whiskeys available. They have E.J. Curley small batch and E.J. Curley single barrel. And I tried the small batch, and I don't know what to expect. And it's like, this is delicious. What's the price point of this? And the lady working the booth says $49.95. Now, all I've been hearing at most of the booths at the Bourbon Festival, $125, $140, $50 small batch. I thought it was delicious.
Let's not tell anybody about this. So we have another bourbon that we can access that nobody else knows of. Oops, wait a minute.
So the rain kind of chased us out of the festival, but my wife and I promptly drove to the brand new Evergreen liquor store in downtown Bardstown and bought 2 bottles of the small batch. We also tried the single barrel, but I'm just over the moon about the small batch. I think the single barrel is priced about 60, 70, Ashley?
$69.99.
There you go.
That's a good price for a single barrel.
Still a good value.
Barrel
So
strength?
Oh, barrel strength.
This is the small batch
Yes.
that we have here. Oh man, that is good.
Chuck gave us a very generous pour.
Yeah, that is a nice pour
Yeah.
there, Chuck.
It is. It's delicious.
So what's
He
the
knew you would enjoy it.
he does know us well. What's the story here, Ashley? Tell us about where this came from. Where is it going?
So this, as I mentioned, the opportunity came across my plate. Previously, after leaving corporate bourbon, I was consulting, and this came across our plate in 2020, probably. And of course, my business partner, Monica Wolf, and I were very excited for a heritage brand. And even more so excited was I got the creative freedom to create what I wanted to do. All right, this is what we're going to do. If you get to create a Heritage Kentucky brand small batch that we want everybody, we want this to be something that in my mind would be an everyday drinker, what would I create?
Right.
And having worked at places like Buffalo Trace and Four Roses, I had a pretty good idea of what a daily drinker would look like. So to me, you got some boxes to check. Not that you should drink every day, but what I would consider a daily drinker is what you keep on the shelf. It's something that's great, neat. It holds up to an ice cube. It's phenomenal in a cocktail. And you're not going to go on a murderous rampage if your brother-in-law drinks the entire bottle. So it has to be affordable. I sometimes have had that problem. I'll come home and I'm like, why is this bottle empty? Oh, so-and-so came by. I'm like, oh, great. Go buy a new one. It was not cheap. So I wanted it to be that, because if your price, I wanted our price to be affordable. We also wanted to own our backyard. We wanted to make sure that Kentucky had first peek at it and the first opportunity. So we've really just started going into other markets too. But back to what I wanted to create. I wanted to create a small batch that was approachable for a new bourbon consumer, and could be appreciated. It was layered, it was complex, checked all the boxes, for the experienced bourbon drinker as well. One of my favorite things to do, especially when I was at Four Roses, we would have events and a couple would come in and be like, one person inevitably, many times would say, oh, don't pour me any, I don't like bourbon. I just bought a ticket for my friend. And I say, okay, you come with me. We had the 10 recipes. So then I could have a conversation with this person, learn the types of foods they like, if they drink wine, what types of wine they liked, and then start to gear them towards one of the 10 recipes that would better fit what they liked. Because what I started to find was, well, we've only tried one or two things, and my buddy here gave me this barrel strength. I'm like, as your first pour, no wonder you've got a negative reaction here. So I wanted to create something that could very safely be someone's first pour, be able to start to introduce them to bourbon in a positive light. And this is what I came up with.
95 proof, right?
95. Yep.
And yeah, I mean, it's smooth as a neat zipper. I could definitely see this as on rocks, and I can't wait to try it in a cocktail to see if it holds up. You've done this before, I'm sure.
I've had it all three. Obviously, I had it neat at the festival. I had it on the rocks when I first took it to some friend's house, and then just to show how affordable it was, we made a cocktail out of it. It stood up very nicely in the cocktail. Actually, a cocktail with ginger ale and bitters. It was delicious. So actually, we're pretty straightforward about that. None of us have master palates. We like what we like. We don't like what we don't like. If you talk about the nose and the tasting notes of your small batch, how will you describe it? What do you get out of it?
Well, let's just talk through it.
Nice.
Good pop there.
Am I right that you started as a chemical engineer?
No.
Incorrect.
I worked in pharmaceuticals and quality control. So my job was to test, well, prior to that was research, but my job was to test all the raw materials. So your active ingredients in their most pure form.
Oh, awesome.
And to make sure they were safe
Hey,
and
drugs are my life
compliant.
too.
You know, when the headhunter called me and was like, "Hey, would you be interested in interviewing at a distillery?" I literally looked at my mom and said, "Booze or drugs?" You know, I think I picked the better one. I'm definitely enjoying it a lot more than when I worked in pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
And I'm told that somewhere along the way, it was observed that you have a terrific palate.
Yes, that was my tasting interview with Buffalo Trace.
Cool.
I thought I was always picky, but apparently I do taste things that others do not. And over the years, I've been able to use that to isolate characteristics and compounds within the whiskey or within the distillate that can help either, you know, when I was consulting more with craft distilleries, trace back to bacterial contamination, or if they're having a cleaning issue, maybe they stress the yeast during fermentation or things of that nature to you know, looking at a distillate at 2 years, saying, how is this going to mature at 4 years? Or will this actually make it to 10 years before it starts going over that bell curve? And, you know, I really got pretty good at that at Four Roses.
Okay.
You know,
Hey, that's a
because we
good
had
skill
so many
set to have
opportunities.
for a Kentuckian right there.
I know it was amazing. It was great to learn from so many amazing true masters and legends in the industry. You know, as you can imagine, every person has their own little niche that makes them unique in the skills they have. And I was able to work with several of those. And then from that kind of develop my own. So yeah, I was absolutely honored and blessed and getting to learn that and create my skill set and get to bring that.
So what are we
So
nosing?
we are nosing our small batch here. I get fresh cherries, and I probably am drawn to that. I like to relate all my smells, all my tastes to memories. And my grandmother used to have this big cherry tree. And it was a sweet cherry in her backyard, and we'd have to go pick cherries every year, all the grandkids. Probably because we could climb up in there. But like a fresh sweet cherry, sweet caramel, like a Werther's caramel.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. And like a soft vanilla, like a vanilla bean ice cream.
So some
Probably sit
classic
here and
bourbon
do
flavors.
lots of classic bourbon. And it's got
With
that
this,
fruit, like a dry strawberry or like a strawberry jam. You know how jammy jams are tend to be more rich and more deep in their flavors than a jelly.
So with this being a
I
small
get more like
batch, are almost all your batches pretty consistent from one to the next?
they are exceptionally consistent. I never dump more than 20 barrels at a time to enable that tight.
Yeah,
I try to keep
that's a very small batch.
Yes. So even in our new facility, I would not go to a tank that was any larger. I said I don't need to dump more than 20 barrels. So, you know, I've gone with smaller tanks for that reason. Any of my brands that I work with, you know, that's something I'm very passionate about, is keeping that as a true small batch so that I have control over the profile. I can manipulate it how I need to keep the most consistent product.
So as you said
You know,
before,
just
I'm sorry, I keep over talking you. I apologize. Ashley, as you said before, you were with the big guys in the Bardstown Bourbon Festival, but you operate basically as like a craft distillery, it sounds like.
yeah. So one of the cool things at the Bourbon Festival, if you came by our tent, everybody that was working is part of our team. Where several owners were there. Of course, myself, Monica were there. The president was there, CEO was there. My production manager that will be overseeing bulk of the production. My assistant / brand representative was there. I mean, these are the individuals that are doing the things. They are physically touching the product and making it happen. And, you know, that's it. We are it. So we are very much in that sense craft and small.
Well, you have amazing product here. I love the nose. I love the taste. You mentioned the sweet cherries, the strawberry jam, the vanilla bean ice cream, and I get all of that. And it's a lovely dark color. I don't see an age statement. It's a Kentucky straight bourbon.
Mhm.
So, and you may not.
Around 5 to 6
that.
years old.
I'm sorry. What was that?
It's around 5 to 6 years old. We'll always stay around that age.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't think it was very young. I thought it had enough complexity there to give you a little sophistication.
Yeah, it's got a nice tobacco finish too. You know, you don't typically see that depth and complexity on the tobacco finish. Little hint of leather in there too. On the younger bourbons, that's something that typically comes with age. But thanks to blending and how I approach that, we're able to pull that out and really highlight it in, you know, this product.
I'd like to talk about blending in just a second, but I think I was told at the Bourbon Festival that, as you say, you're going to make your small batches from no more than 20 barrels, but not all those barrels are necessarily coming from the same distillery. Is that right?
So ours are coming from the same distillery, but no, they don't have to. And
Okay.
that's one of the wonderful things about blending and the art and craft of blending is I could take, this is the profile I want, and use barrels from other distilleries, use barrels with slightly different mash bills, and still achieve my end profile. That's the keeping the batches small, that's working the blends and manipulating the flavor profiles to reach, you know, that end target.
So do you have a tasting panel that goes through each batch to ensure it's consistent?
I usually will let a few people taste. I
I'm
would
sure
love to have a bigger tasting panel.
Your palate's excellent.
We
there's
volunteer
three
in
guys here that-
tribute.
yeah. We'll drive
Some
down.
tribute volunteers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's
So
the
I'm
expanse of our
always-
ability to contribute. Yeah, I like that. No, I don't like that. That's good.
I'm always looking for new tasters. I think my husband's a little gun shy these days because I don't always let him taste good stuff. It's like, here, taste this. And he's been burned a few times, especially in the beginning stages of my consultancy.
So blending, especially when it comes to bourbon, had a very bad connotation once upon a time. If you heard somebody say this is a blended whiskey, what they're probably saying was, we started with some bourbon, and then to keep things cheap, we poured in some neutral grain alcohol, and we made a bottom shelf whiskey. And blend just had a bad name in bourbon. Am I right?
You are absolutely right. In the US, it was kind of a bad word, I feel like, and we are finally starting to see the light that even though we didn't celebrate the blenders here like they do in Europe, every distillery has one. They might be titled as a quality manager. They might be titled, some distillers do some blending. There's so many other titles that were given to people who were still doing the blending. You know, that was still a role that had to be filled. They just didn't get the credit I feel like they deserved because, you know, the blenders, we work from grain to the maturate. We're not just working on one section.
So at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, one of the little panel discussions that took place was three distillers that included Brent Elliott from Four Roses and Freddie No from Jim Beam. And at one point, they started talking about blending, and Brent leaned over and thanked Freddie for doing what he had done to take away the bad connotation of blending. In fact, they were joking that there was a time where distilleries were talking about mingling. We're not blending, we're mingling. But
oh yeah, Four Roses did for a long time.
So it took me a while, just like the first time I encountered a blended red wine. I thought, well, that must not be much. Well, that's stupid. Blended red wines are outstanding, or can be outstanding. They can be terrific. But I'm really beginning to appreciate that great blending can produce great whiskey. In fact, at the same time that I went to the liquor store in Bardstown to pick up your product, when I first walked in the door, there was shoot, the brandy distillery in Louisville.
Copper and King.
Thank you. I keep wanting to say Castle and Key. So I walk into the liquor store in downtown Bardstown, and there it's Copper and Kings. And I knew that they were coming out with a Copper and Kings bourbon, and there is their master distiller, Brandon, offering taste of it. So I tried, and I said, Brandon, I've always liked your brandy anyway, but I really like this bourbon, and they're not making a bourbon at that distillery. So he's sourcing it, and he says that he's blending this from a combination of 5-year, 10-year, and 15-year bourbon. And it's like, this is terrific stuff. Bardstown Bourbon obviously is put itself on the map with blending with some of its early releases. So I just want to say that I think that E.J Curley helped show what terrific blending can produce.
Yeah, and I love that you guys own up to blending, and not calling it something that it really isn't. It's blending, and you guys hopefully can change the narrative of what people think when they think of blended whiskey.
I always like to find a great single barrel that just is fantastic. It's kind of a Easter egg hunt, right? But then there are times when you just want something to taste the way it's supposed to taste. And I appreciate that. Consistency. And you guys, you specifically have found this bourbon, this elixir here that just really hits on all cylinders. And I want it to be there every time I reach for a bottle and not hit and miss.
It will be.
Perfect.
I can promise you that.
So actually, it looks like you're in a laboratory.
I am. I'm in my blending lab.
Boy, do I ever want to get to go to her blending lab.
A blending lab. That sounds like fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I think it used to be a formal sitting room, but I thought it was better used as a blending lab.
Cool.
So I do have a question. How long have you been in the bourbon business?
12 years.
Okay, so of those 12 years, women in bourbon, it seems like there's much more women in the bourbon industry than, I've been in the liquor business 11 years. And I remember when there was hardly any master distillers, master tasters that were women. So have you seen an evolution in women in the bourbon industry?
I have. We've started to see more women step forward, and I think they're feeling more comfortable in those roles, saying, yes, I'm the one doing this and owning up to it. Because for a long time, it was a hard discussion. Like, yeah, I'm doing it, but it would be better coming from someone else. And we're starting to really see women step forward and own that and say, yeah, I've got a great palate and this opportunity and this talent and this skill. I love the evolution. I left Four Roses in 2018. So I've been, Monica and I've really been doing things kind of on the edge of this for several years now, which is really cool to see everything, from where we were to where we are now as well.
If memory serves, Marianne Eves was a master taster at Woodford Reserve before she went into distilling, and I think she's working as a consultant now. I think Brown Foreman has a lady who is a master taster. And I asked the question of some people in the industry one time, and they said, and they observed that women really often have better palates and are more discerning than
what do they not do better than we do? Let me ask you. I'm not really sure there's anything. Can we talk a little bit about distribution? Where are you? Where can we find this? If we have some listeners that are outside of the Commonwealth, how can they get a hold of some of this?
So we do ship from our website, would be the most accessible way. There was a store locator on our website as well. We are now we'll be in Missouri. I'm actually going there next week and should be on the shelves by about mid-October, and in New York. We are also in Illinois at Benny's, excuse me. We've actually sold through several single barrels at Benny's up in Chicago, which is pretty cool. So those are the only places as of right now. However, I expect that we will be seeing several markets increase over the next couple of years as well.
And so eventually the Camp Nelson location is going to be a visitor destination. Is that right?
It is, yes. I think as of right now, we're projected around 2025.
Okay.
So I assume
definitely
this is a
something to
beautiful
keep an eye on.
place in Kentucky that is going to be a go-to. Are you going to be like an event space as well?
To my knowledge, there's not a plan for an event space per se, but um, more of an honor and homage to the history, get an amazing cocktail, hiking. I think there's several places to put in canoes, kayaking, really enjoy the natural beauty and the Palisades and the flora and fauna that's found on that site.
That's a Chuck and Donna Stinnett destination if I've ever heard one right there.
No question about it. We will, as soon as you all are open, we will be there. We'd love to visit distilleries and visitor centers. Lovely location. It's going to be just along US 27 between Lexington and Danville on the Kentucky River, on the basically on the Jessamine and is it Garrett County that's across the river?
Yes.
So
Yep. So Green County is one side, and then we're on the Jessamine County side.
very much in central Kentucky, and it's going to be, well, I can't wait.
I'm excited, and I can't wait to have you guys down to experience what we are planning and envisioning for the visitor center on site. It's many years in the making and some transitions and changes of plans, and we think we're going one direction, then we're going somewhere else. But I can promise you, we will always have this amazing small batch.
Yeah, I was about to say, we'll keep making this. Good things are happening, let me tell you. So very cool.
Well, congratulations to you. I think you made a terrific product, and E.J Curley was my big surprise of the Kentucky Bourbon Festival in 2023. It kind of made my bourbon festival.
That's amazing to hear. Thank you. It's an honor.
Well, thanks for being with us. We've enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's always good to get on and chat about bourbon and history and all the amazing things going on in our industry right now. It's a very exciting time.
Well, how cool was that? Thank you, Ashley. We appreciate it. Man, I love this bourbon.
I was just so pleased. I think it's a great find, both as a tasting product or a product to taste, but that price point. You don't find many bourbons this tasty at that $49.95 price. It's a great value. It's a good addition to the bourbon world.
Yeah, Brian, you going to add this one to the show?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, for the price, I mean, you do not find very many bourbons hitting the market nowadays that's new for that price point. So I'm definitely going to add this to the bar and add it to the liquor stores as well.
Can't wait. I'll buy it.
Great tasting bourbon, great history. We like a story with our bourbon. I can't wait to see what these guys do.
Yeah, I think they're going to do great things, especially once they get their distillery up and operational and allow visitors in there. So I'm looking forward to it.
Can't wait to visit.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. We appreciate you listening to Distilled the Bourbon Podcast. And as always, please drink responsibly.